It's the amazing Rico Brogna podcast with your host, Evan Roberts.
All together now. Sweet. And by the way, I don't give a crap that it's the Washington Nationals. A sweep is a sweep is a sweep. The New York Mets complete the utter domination of the Washington Nationals, shutting them out 10-0 on a Wednesday night. And here is why, as a Met fan, you should never, ever, ever, ever apologize for beating a crappy team. How many times over the years have we seen this team lose to said crappy team? How many times over the years in the middle of a pennant race with everything right in front of you have we seen the New York Mets not score 9 runs in the 4th inning against a crappy team? How many times have we seen a starting pitcher like Jose Quintana not twirl 7 scoreless innings against a crappy team? How often have we seen the New York Mets not win 10 out of 12, I should say 11 out of 13 against a crappy team? And the answer is a lot. You know, part of why there was some worry going into this 3-game series against the Washington Nationals is that this team, this franchise, even this core, we've had a tough time trusting to take care of business against crappy teams. Besides getting swept by Atlanta in 2022, one of the bugaboos that allowed them to not win the National League East, even though they did win a lot of regular season games, was they didn't do a good enough job in September of beating bad teams. So apologize to nobody. The New York Mets did something they needed to do. They beat the daylights out of a bad team. And they followed a very similar formula. This is the formula of the down the stretch New York Mets. Number one, and this is the key to the formula, and this is the lead, in my opinion. This is the headline, in my opinion. Get utterly brilliant starting pitching. And right now, the Mets are rolling 5 deep. It does not matter who is starting. It doesn't matter if it's Sean Manaea. It doesn't matter if it's Luis Severino. It even doesn't matter if it's Tyler McGill, like we saw in Game 2 of this series. Does not matter. Doesn't matter if it's David Peterson. And on a night like tonight, Game 3 of this 3-game series, it did not matter that it was Jose Quintana who twirls 7 more scoreless innings. He is now on a scoreless streak. That's 23 1/3 innings. He is throwing some of the best baseball of his career. The inconsistent Jose Quintana is now dealing. And that's the key to this whole formula. And that is, and has to be, the most stunning part of what the Mets have accomplished. This team is now 84-68. Even greater than my optimistic expectations, in which I thought the Mets would be an 86-win team. Well, they are hopefully a few days away from matching that total and surpassing that total. But never in my wildest dreams, while I was optimistic about the team, did I think that their formula would involve dominant starting pitching. I mean, dominant starting pitching. You know, we grew up, whether you're my age or older or a little bit younger, the Mets have a storied history of starting pitching, going all the way back to the great George Thomas Seaver into the 80s with just an incredible staff that was led by Doc Gooden and Ron Darling and Bob Ojeda and Sid Fernandez. And then you even go into the late 90s, the 1-2 punch of Al Leiter and Mike Hampton. It didn't work out this way in 2006, but on paper, they had Pedro Martinez and Tommy Glavine and El Duque. And obviously 2015 goes without saying. This is a franchise with a history of great starting pitching. And little did we know that the group of Quintana, Peterson, Severino, McGill, and Manaea would be the modern-day Orioles of the late 60s. That's the way they're pitching, though. Their numbers over the last month are certifiable. They don't make any sense. Jose Quintana has had a good career, and Sean Manaea has had moments, and Luis Severino has had moments. But for Sevy and Manaea, those moments haven't been for 6 years. And they're putting it all together, and they're doing it on a nightly basis. And they're doing it so that when the Mets offense doesn't do anything in the first 3 innings of a game, like it didn't do in game 3 of this series, you almost have this relaxed feeling of, just give it time. Give it time. The starting pitching is so freaking awesome. Give it time. The bats will eventually wake up. That's what happened in game 2 of this series, right? They went 2 innings without scoring. In game 1 of this series, they basically went the entire game without scoring and eventually won it on the Starling Marte game-winning hit. But what we saw in this game was missed opportunity in the first inning. And it was. Starling Marte draws a walk in that number 2 hole, steals second base. Mets are set up with a runner in scoring position, and they failed to get him in. Brandon Nimmo grounded out. Pete Alonso lined out. Real quick about the Pete Alonso line out. And I had this nice discussion with Sal Licata. He came on Evan and Tiki earlier today. We were doing a whole SNY day. We were at SNY. Of course, he works for SNY. And I said to Sal, Sal, Pete Alonso got a big hit. It doesn't matter if he hit the ball 40 miles an hour. That's a big hit. I'm sorry. I'm going to be very calm right now. I've talked a lot today. 40 miles an hour is a big hit. I don't give 2 shits if a ball is hit 180 miles an hour or 40 miles an hour. Did it fall in? Did it drive in runs? And one of my additions to that was, much like I don't care if a guy lines out with runners in scoring position. If he didn't get the run in, he didn't get the run in. So Pete Alonso, who some of you, not all of you, some of you want to criticize for hitting meaningless home runs or blooping big hits, in the bottom of the first inning with a runner on third and 2 outs, Pete Alonso hit the crap out of a ball. Great. You want to have a party? Want to have a celebration? He hit it right at the left fielder, James Wood. It was an out. It was the third out. I mean, so what would you rather have? What would you rather have? Would you rather have the bloop that drives in 2 runs or the line drive that drives in no runs? Baseball's a weird freaking game. Wee Willie Keeler said it best. Hit him where it ain't. But I will not marginalize a clutch hit because it wasn't hit hard. Just like you're not going to celebrate a non-hit because it was hit hard. So I thought that was really perfect timing for Pete, who, oh, by the way, had a pretty good day. He ripped a base hit in the 4th inning behind in the count, which was a part of the Mets rallying and breaking the game open. And if you want to look for a line out as a productive sign, he lined out. It's a productive sign. So it wasn't a bad day by Pete Alonso. But don't decide to crap on how hard a ball is hit when it drives in 2 runs, because the next night when he hits a ball hard and it's right at somebody, what, does that make you feel better? I think the overall point is they tend to even out. That's the way baseball is. But the Mets had an opportunity in the first inning, and Brandon Nimmo grounded out. What else is new? Pete Alonso lined out. They got a 2-out base runner in the second inning. They did nothing. And then they made DJ Hurst look really good in the third when he struck out the side. So depending on where your confidence level is, you're loving what you're seeing from Quintana, but it's the same crap with this offense. But hey, if Quintana keeps dealing zeros, just give yourself time before you start hitting. And my God, that 4th inning, you want to bottle that 4th inning. You want to take that 4th inning and you want to remember it. You want to put it in the spank bank, if you will. Not that I would ever do that. I don't know why I said that, but I'm thinking of the memory, truthfully. And that memory, not that memory, but the memory of having a big inning. Save me, Pete. I don't know why that came out of my mouth. But anyhow.
Well, that's because you're a Howard Stern fan. That's why. That's a very Howard Stern-esque line. So.
I didn't even, but I'm not like literally, I don't take innings and think about it later. I'm just saying it was a great inning. It was a very enjoyable inning. But
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to bed tonight. I'm gonna go into a private room, and all I'm gonna think about is the 4th inning of Mets Nationals. But that was a great inning. Brandon Nimmo draws a walk. Pete's behind in the count, getting a base hit. I thought those were 2 really positive signs because Nimmo hasn't done a lot. So him starting the inning with a walk was nice. Pete Alonso getting a base hit was nice. Tyrone Taylor, my God, I mean, Tyrone Taylor has to play every day. I know we've said that the last few days, and luckily Mendy's backed it up by continuing to run him out there every day. But he comes through with an RBI double. The one knock on the RBI double, not on Taylor, he was behind in the count and lofted it to right center field, was what the hell was Brandon Nimmo doing? You have first and second and nobody out. Taylor hits one up the alley. I guess for a second you think Jacob Young may run it down, but Brandon Nimmo was basically going back to second base to tag up. And Young, getting to watch teams in your division, you learn a lot about these guys. Jacob Young's a very good defensive center fielder. I don't know if he's going to hit enough in the major leagues, but very good defensive center fielder. He runs that ball down, makes a perfect throw to the relay man. They almost got Nimmo at the plate on a double from second base. Like, how's that possible? So luckily, Brandon barely got in. I mean, it was microscopically close for him getting in. But that wasn't base running you're going to send to Cooperstown, or base running you're going to tell your kids, boy, what's that kind of base running? I mean, that was some horrible base running by Brandon Nimmo, but that's okay. It worked out. And it continued to work out when Luis Angel Acuna comes through with a big RBI hit. When Mark Vientos comes through. And I should point this out about that inning, the fourth inning. A part of what was so impressive was Nimmo draws a walk. Pete gets a base hit behind in the count 1-2. Taylor hits the RBI double behind in the count 1-2. Vientos, who is in this massive batting slump, and this game feels like maybe it's the game he breaks out of it because he did have multiple hits and some very good at-bats. He comes through with that 2-run single behind in the count 1-2. So you not only saw the Mets getting big hits, you saw them doing it behind in the count against DJ Hers, who's a lot better than maybe you realize. If you look at the way he's pitched this year, he's got pretty good stuff. He's actually been effective. He pitched well against the Mets a little while back. So I know you hear the name. Maybe we forget about him. It feels like a nobody. He's thrown the ball well this year in his rookie season. And the Mets put together some great at-bats. Luis Angel Acuna coming through with an RBI single. Iglesias behind in the count coming through with a little blue base hit. Starling Marte, who, boy, you got him at the right time. I mean, Starling Marte is now healthy and he's hitting. The game-winning hit a couple of days ago. He comes through with a big 2-run single. And then Brandon Nimmo's 3-run home run, which was the icing on the cake. It's what made a 6-0 game a 9-0 game. Was encouraging for a myriad of reasons. And I'll give you my real-time thought on something that I don't think is going to happen, but a part of why the Nimmo home run excited me. It broke open a game, made it 9-0. It was a big hit for Brandon, who really hasn't hit a lot. And I was thinking, hear me out on this, and I'll spend more time on it later, but this was a thought going on throughout this game. I found it mysterious that Mendy would not name a starter for Sunday. And I had mentioned this on the Rico a few days ago, as well as Quintana's pitching. I guess now my opinion may change, but certainly the last few days before another great start by Quintana, my thought was, I like Quintana, but I think I'd prefer Sevy, Minaya, and Peterson against Atlanta. That would be my big three, if you will. And the way the rotation is lining up, Quintana's day would actually fall on Monday. They're off, so it would be Tuesday. And so it wouldn't be those three guys. Someone would not be making that start against Atlanta, and that's not, at least at the time, preferable for me. So with Sunday being an open day where Mendy is not named a starter, it is Tyler McGill's day to pitch, in case you're curious. I thought, wow, up 9-0, big lead, fresh bullpen. Is it possible he pulls Quintana early and brings Quintana back on 3 days rest Sunday against Philadelphia? Is it a wild idea? I don't know if it's wild, but it was a thought. And this is something that's worthy of kind of debating and really thinking about, especially the way Quintana's pitching. Which three pitchers do you want against Atlanta? Because I think it was easy a few days ago to say the three I mentioned, which is Peterson, Minaya, and Severino. But I think Jose Quintana being on a 23 and a third inning scoreless streak has complicated that question. But nevertheless, when they broke the game open 9-0, like after 5 innings, Quintana's pitch count was 66. Thinking, boy, you take him out here, he'll be totally fine to come back on Sunday on 3 days rest against the Phillies. After 6 innings, his pitch count was 77. Still relatively low. But obviously, Mendy wasn't thinking that way. He allowed Quintana to complete the 7th. So his pitch count ended up, I think, close to 90. I'll have to double check. I didn't write it down. I usually do on my scorecard. I did not do that. Let's see. Quintana finished at 90, so right on the number. So I doubt that's being considered. And look, the way he's throwing, I think the consideration is he should start in that series against Atlanta. That may be the big three we identified, let's say, a week ago. It's starting to change, not because any of those three guys lost a spot, but because Quintana's been amazing. But it was very good to see Brandon Nimmo come through with that big hit. Brandon Nimmo has just missed home runs a lot recently, especially down the right field line. So for him to hit number 20, for him to break open the game was great to see. After that, Luis Acuna hit a home run in the 8th inning, his second major league home run. Another impressive performance by him. Another impressive performance by his defense as well. He looks very good and very comfortable at shortstop. And look, without a shadow of a doubt, this is obvious. I think even Mendy knows this. He's the shortstop until Lindor is back. Eddie Alvarez has made some good defensive plays at second base. I give him credit for that. But Acuna looks like he belongs. And that's exciting because I think from afar, you saw his numbers down in the minor leagues and were like, man, they didn't do anything for you. But as Mendy even pointed out, sometimes guys with that kind of talent get bored in the minor leagues, which I've heard a lot. I think Matt Harvey had that too. He's come up to the major leagues. He looks like a stud. He looks like a star. His defense has been very good at shortstop. Obviously, that's not his long-term future with a healthy Francisco Lindor. It may be at second base. It may be in the outfield. Obviously, that's more of a discussion for the offseason. But for the right now, with the Mets needing him, with Lindor out, Acuna has been tremendous. Does not look intimidated by the moment. Looks comfortable. Despite the miscue he made in game 2 of this series on that low throw by Mark Vientos, his defense looks incredibly stellar. But man, the starting pitching. Man, oh man, Jose Quintana. You guys wanted to trade him at the deadline. Well, I may have suggested that too. Right now, the Mets have 5 starting pitchers, including Tyler McGill. You have to include him with the way he's pitched, that are all on just a different level right now with the way they're throwing the baseball, which leads me to that question. What 3 guys do you want facing the Atlanta Braves in that 3-game series? And keep this in mind. Those games are very, very important. I think we owe the Atlanta Braves, and those games are, insanely important. The Mets have a 2-game lead. The Braves were able to bounce back and win that game against Cincinnati on Wednesday. We'll see what the lead, if they have a lead, looks like going into the series against Atlanta. But you also want to have guys lined up for Milwaukee, because those games are going to matter too. I'd love to go into the Milwaukee series with it not mattering and the Mets having a playoff spot wrapped up, but realistically, those games are going to be very important too. So I'm curious what Mendy's thinking right now, because if you look at the way the rotation is lined up, let's take a look at the Philadelphia series that starts tomorrow night. Luis Severino against Taijuan Walker. So you got Sevy. You got David Peterson against Christopher Sanchez on Saturday. You have Sean Manaea against Ranger Suarez that's Saturday. I think I have every day off. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then Sunday is Zach Wheeler against TBD. Assume it's Tyler McGill because it is his day, despite the Mets not announcing that. That would mean the 3-game series against Atlanta would be Quintana, Severino, and Peterson. Are they really going to do that? Sean Manaea has been their best pitcher. Quintana's been great over the last 4 or 5 starts, but Manaea's great run starts even further back. So I'm curious how they're going to line things up. Obviously, Kodai Senga is now a factor. Kodai Senga is planning on pitching an inning down in the minor leagues over the weekend. What I'm about to say is don't take this as a negative. Don't take this as I'm just being negative. I kind of have a feeling he's not going to pitch, Kodai Senga. And it's not a prediction based on negativity. It's not a prediction based on injury. It's a prediction based on something Kodai Senga said the other day. He said, I want to pitch. I want to help this team. I need to be 100%. He doesn't want to come back half-assed. And right now, Kodai Senga believes he's at 70%. I'm skeptical that with one rehab start in which he plans to pitch one inning at Syracuse, that is going to be enough for a perfectionist like Senga to say, I'm 100%, throw me in the pennant race. And oh, by the way, I'm the opener. Like, I'm starting a game and I'm pitching an inning or two. I don't see it happening. I'm actually at the point where I'd be surprised if Kodai Senga pitches over the weekend against Atlanta or Milwaukee. I would, because think about it. Like, yes, in theory, the idea that the Mets could start Kodai Senga, force a team to kind of put together their left-handed lineup, if you will, and then 2 innings in, you move over to Jose Quintana. Like, yeah, on paper, it sounds great, but these guys are humans. Jose Quintana is a human who's pitching some of the best baseball of his major league career. I don't know if it's as automatic as, oh, what a great idea on paper. Senga pitches an inning. Here comes Quintana. Quintana's got to warm up, maybe in the middle of an inning. He's going to come into a game where maybe he's losing. Who knows if Kodai Senga gives up, a first inning home run to Marcelo Zuna or whomever. I don't know. And I also don't know. And I love Kodai Senga. I really do. I don't know if this is actually the smartest thing to do when you've got a rotation that's pitching as well as it's pitching. Like, why screw with it? So Kodai should pitch over the weekend, see how he feels. Look, maybe he goes out there at AAA Syracuse and strikes out the side on 11 pitches, and he's like, man, my mechanics are clean. I feel good. And then screw it, I'm going to come back. Let's do it. But right now, with the rotation not being an issue, in fact, the opposite of that, this rotation 1 through 5 is pitching as well as you'll ever see a rotation pitch. I don't know if the best idea is to mess around with it. The other guy who may be on his way back is Brett Beatty. Brett Beatty was activated from the injured list down in the minor leagues. He started off by going 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts. I don't know if I see an avenue for him either. Because when you look at this Met roster and you look at what they currently have, Luisangel Acuna is earning staying. He's earning being on this roster, even if Francisco Lindor walks through that door for the Phillies series and says, I'm good to go. So I don't know. Like, it's great that Beatty came back. Good for him as a competitor. Stay ready. You never know. I mean, think about it. The Mets make the playoffs, knock on wood. They go on a playoff run, and then all of a sudden, they're ravaged by injuries in the middle of the NLCS. Like, you need guys available, so you never know if Brett will be called upon. But as of right now, assuming the Mets can remain healthy, I don't see it, especially with only 4 at-bats since returning from the injured list. He just came back. Let me get to Lindor. This is perfect. This is perfect. We were talking about this on the radio the other day. We were trying to make predictions. When do we think Lindor is going to come back? And I know that's an impossible thing to predict because of this back issue that he's dealing with, and you never know what a back's going to do to you. We saw what it did to David Wright. I can tell you firsthand what it does to me every day. Back issues suck, man. It's why I fiddle in my chair all the time, for those that have asked. That's why, because my back hurts. Now, I am not an athlete. I don't pretend to be an athlete, but I can only imagine what Francisco Lindor is going through. And I am hopeful, the way we all are, that he'll be back in a couple of days. But what I said on the air, and it's happening right now, is if the Mets can play well, and throw in Acuna playing well too, by the way. Throw in the fact that Luisangel Acuna has 5 hits in the last 2 games. And oh, by the way, has played very good defense despite the kind of the bugaboo or the little hiccup that he had in game 2 of this series early. If they're going to continue to win and Acuna is going to continue to play well, I think you give Lindor as much time as humanly possible. I look at game 1 of this Philadelphia series with the Mets maintaining a 2-game lead in the wild card and also tied with Arizona. So they are the second wild card team. I think that is a cushion for a day. I'm not saying forever, to push back off Thursday and tell Francisco, oh, you feel great. You're ready to come back. One more day. That's how I would handle this right now. And that's not about, I don't want him back in the lineup. We all want Lindor back in the lineup. We know what he's done this season. But remember, when he does come back, if he comes back, I don't want to say when because who the hell knows. If he comes back, he's probably going to be compromised. Now, that doesn't mean he can't produce. It doesn't mean he can't be good. but he may be compromised. Here's also a thought. And I'm sure you've thought this because how can you not? Right now, JD Martinez is a disaster. He's a mess to where Carlos Mendoza didn't play him in game 3 of this series. We saw Starling Marte DH. And we talked about it over the last few Ricos. Hey, when do you consider sitting him? If you're going to play the hot hand, JD Martinez ain't that guy. JD Martinez struggling and Mendy making the decision to sit him because right now he has not earned playing time also creates the opportunity to DH Francisco Lindor. What I wonder about, though, because that sounds like a great idea. You know, I always hear Aaron Boone talk about, I'm getting Judgy off his feet. I'm going to DH Aaron Judge. DHing Lindor seems like a really good idea. It's a good way to ease him back. I wonder, though, if he's sitting on the bench for most of the game, waiting for his at-bat, if that actually could negatively affect his back, that he almost may benefit from being out there and playing shortstop and being out there for 9 innings. So I think that's something you talk to Francisco about, but it's an option if they feel that may be the best way to utilize him and slowly get him back. It also would allow you to keep Luisangel Acuna in the lineup. And this is now 2 consecutive games in which he's had some great at-bats. He hits home runs. Are the Mets comfortable enough for Luisangel Acuna in the middle of a pennant race to play center field, where he played 30 games this season? I wouldn't even say play second base because I just don't think that makes sense. I'm not messing with Jose Iglesias. I'm not messing with Mark Vientos despite the batting slump, which it hopefully means he's getting out of with the 2 hits he had in game 3 of this series. So I don't think second base would be the avenue. I think the avenue would be the outfield. That'd be the place. I think that would be the place where you could potentially get him at bats. But the Mets have a good problem right now. They have a lot of guys that are earning their playing time. Brandon Nimmo has a productive day. It's a 3-run home run, draws a big walk. He's also Brandon Nimmo. He's begging fans to come to the ballpark. I want to get to that in a little bit. He should play. Tyrone Taylor has to play, at least for now. May not be a long-term thing, but he continues to be hot. Ty's got to be out there. Starling Marte's got to be out there. So I think you've got 3 outfielders, and obviously you could DH Marte, who you feel pretty good about running out there. Harrison Bader, look, Bader is such a plus defensively that even when he's not hitting, he does give you that positive. Jesse Winker against right-handed pitching. Don't forget Jesse, because the Mets just faced a couple of left-handers. But Jesse Winker is a guy you still want out there. JD Martinez is going to lose at-bats. He's going to find himself, I don't want to say buried. That's not right. Because there is a part of me that still wants JD out there because of what I know he can potentially do. But if you're playing the hot hand, got to be smart. Now, let me get to some of your emails to ricob@gmail.com. This is the Mets Sweep the Nationals edition of Rico Brogna. Bunch of things I do want to get to. So please remind me if I forget. I do want to talk about the team meeting, which we didn't really get a chance to talk about on the drive home edition of Rico yesterday. The team meeting that involved David Stearns, Carlos Mendoza, and an impassionate Pete Alonso. We'll get to that. But let me get to some of your emails. Yuck Seal writes, love the podcast. Who would we rather face in the wild card round? The Milwaukee Brewers or the San Diego Padres? So I had this question asked to me a couple of times over the last 2 days. First of all, are we really doing that? Let's make the playoffs. Make the playoffs, and whoever we play, we play. But I respect the question, even if I don't want to necessarily answer it. I think emotionally I want to play the Padres. Because of 2 years ago, it feels like that's the perfect sweet revenge, especially if the Mets knock out the Braves next week. They actually do a good job in Atlanta, make the playoffs, knock them out. This could almost be the New York Mets revenge tour. Knock out Atlanta, knock out San Diego, and then create new family business if the Mets can go on a run. So I think emotionally, I would say San Diego. I think a lot of people they don't take Milwaukee seriously. And the Milwaukee Brewers have had a really good season. But you look at their lineup, and, Willie Adames has had a very productive season. Jackson Chourio has had a very good young season. Christian Yelich is out for the season. No one really else scares you. I mean, William Contreras is a good player, but you don't fear them. And their rotation, other than Freddie Peralta, who's had an average season, their rotation doesn't necessarily jump out at you. So I don't think the Brewers get enough, I guess, fear or respect because they don't have a lot of superstar household names. San Diego does. But, to be fair, I think my instant reaction is I owe the San Diego Padres, or we owe the San Diego Padres. Frank writes, here is at full strength the ideal New York Mets lineup. And it's not in order, it's just who he would want playing. Because I think the order with Mendy changes so much. Tell me if you guys agree with this. This is Frank's opinion. Alvarez behind the plate. Pete Alonso at first base. Acuna at second base. Whoa. Lindor at shortstop. Iglesias at third. Nimmo in left. Tyrone Taylor in center. Starling Marte in right. Bader, Winker, J.D. Turins, and Brett Beatty on the bench. I don't need Eddie Alvarez with Acuna and Lindor around. I'd rather have a lefty who can run into one. The bench will be used when matchups make sense. He did leave out a DH, so I'm not sure who you want to have in that DH role. Does J.D. Martinez and Jesse Winker basically become a platoon? And he also let Vientos out, which I think is a mistake, unless you're DHing Vientos. So I don't necessarily agree with you. I think that while Acuna's been awesome, and Acuna definitely excites us about what could be next season, is everyday player right now is not it would be the outfield, and the outfield is pretty stacked right now. Gary writes, inning after striking out the side. As I was just watching the 9-run fourth inning, mashing, and remembering the inning before, DJ Hurst struck out the side. It seems the Mets have big innings right after they look foolish the inning before. I seem to remember other games where this happened, where they just have awful at-bats, and then the next inning blast off multiple runs. Not sure if it's just the high of this inning or that I'm realizing it, or maybe there's something to it. Maybe this is a new strategy for a team during these stressful games. Purposely strike out all 3 at-bats one inning to get the opposing pitcher's confidence as the ultimate high, and then drop the hammer the next inning. Ha ha, just a thought. You know what I think it is? So we've seen this all year where the Mets communicate with each other. Everybody's talking to each other, especially Lindor when he's out there, where he'll put his arm around Pete Alonso and basically tell him his thoughts about what he just saw from a pitcher. And so I think what happened is that the Mets struggled against a good young lefty they have struggled against before in DJ Hurst. And maybe in that fourth inning, those conversations, some of which we see, some of which we don't see, finally paid off. Maybe that's what it comes down to. Maybe, those first 3 innings in which the Met offense did very little, managing a base hit and a walk, it's collecting data points. It's seeing a pitcher, and then the adjustments are made, and they're able to explode with the big hits that they had in the fourth inning. Maybe that's what it is. But the reality is we've seen that a lot, not necessarily with them being embarrassed, but with the Mets just not hitting and not scoring and then exploding. And look, we all want to see consistency. If you're going to score 10 runs a game, which the Mets just did the last 2 days, that's fine. That is completely fine. All right? Even if it takes a few innings to get there. It did, but over the last 2 games against the Nationals, the Mets outscored them 20-1. 20-1. Now, let me get to this meeting that took place the other night. First of all, I thought it was kind of concerning and kind of weird that David Stearns would come down to that locker room and have a meeting with the team to pump everybody up. It almost makes you think that maybe they're more concerned about Lindor than they're letting on. Maybe they're just being cautious, I should say, in that they don't want the team off back-to-back losses to Philadelphia to let things snowball because of the injury to Lindor. And they could have. No question they could have. And it looked like it was. Remember, they were losing 1-0 in the 8th inning of game 1 of this series. The Mets were on the verge of losing 3 consecutive games, wasting brilliant starting pitching, and we'd all be panicking. Think about that. Mets don't, put together that little cheap rally in the 8th inning to tie that game up and then obviously win it on the Marte game winner in extra innings. It is panic city all over again. But it was interesting that the GM or the president on his own with the manager would come down and have a meeting like that. As far as Pete being emotional, I think Pete is a very emotional guy. I think Pete Alonso is kind of an awkward guy. Who the hell am I to say that? I'm a very awkward guy myself. And I think that Pete's speaking from the heart and talking about how much he wants to party and hasn't had the chance to party and celebrate a postseason berth or a postseason advancement or anything like that, how much it means to him. I think that's just real. I think that's how Pete feels. Look, I think at the end of the day, Pete Alonso is probably going to be like most MLB free agents. He's going to take the best contract he gets. And personally, I haven't thought about his free agency in a very long time. I just haven't. I am concerned about this season and this moment. But I think that that's where that came from, that's an emotional baseball player, knows what's on the line, knows how quickly things can go awry, and he wants it badly. What was funny is that Pete was then asked about that meeting and said, how do you guys know? And I kind of believe that he wasn't acting, because Pete Alonso said this to me twice. Once during the comedy events that Craig and I used to host, but earlier this year in spring training, when I went to spring training with my big bushy beard, and I jokingly, but not really jokingly, asked Pete permission to cut my beard, he proceeded to say, I don't listen to the show. I don't listen to any show. I don't listen to the radio. I really try to ignore anything that's said about me or us. And it was genuine. So I think when a story like the locker room story comes out, Pete Alonso has no idea it came out. And by the way, that's a very healthy thing. I would advise any athlete, like, do not listen to sports talk radio. Do not read the newspapers. Do not check social media. Don't do any of that. Be oblivious to what's being said around you. That's the smartest thing you can do. So I kind of genuinely believe that he had no idea that meeting got leaked out and people were talking about it. No idea. But let that meeting be another kind of legendary story on the fire of the 2024 Mets, because this team has had a million different stories, a million different gimmicks, a million different start and stops. It's part of what has made this season so far, and there is still work to be done. There is still 10 games left in this season, and anything short of the postseason would be a disaster. Let me make that very clear, and I think we all know that. So there's a lot of work to be done, but man, this story of this season has had so many cliffs, so many peaks, so many valleys, so many things that make you say, who threw out the first pitch? That this season will be remembered. There's a lot of Mets seasons. Like if I said right now, 2012, what jumps out at you? Does anything jump out at you? R.A. Dickey? Okay, maybe that's it. But there's a lot of Mets seasons that no one really, you have to think about to remember. I do think, Hoff, 2024 has been so uniquely insane that good or bad, we are never going to forget this season.
Well, that's what I've been saying for a while. I'm like, this has been one of the most fun seasons I can remember, and the expectations were so little. And I truly, I've been on this ride, like you, like all the other fans, and I've had belief in this team. And even when there were 11 games under 500, I felt like something like this was going to happen. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because Stearns. Maybe it's because Cohen. Maybe it's because you got rid of the Wilpon stench. That this is, I mean, seriously. And let me just say something about the Pete Alonso stuff too, because you know what? People bash Pete Alonso all the time. He's not a leader. He's not this. He's not that. I don't know what goes on in the clubhouse, but he seems like that guy that he doesn't want to be in the spotlight. The spotlight finds him. So when we're talking about, like, he legitimately asked him, how did you know that I said anything? Like that came from the heart. Like the whatever words he said in that locker room was the same. He presented it the same way as when he asked reporters, like, how'd you guys know about that? He doesn't want to be the leader. He doesn't want to be that guy.
I mean, look, he doesn't have to be a leader. You know, I think that what we had talked about for a while is he may not be the leader or doesn't have to be the leader, but you need some leaders in that room. Clearly, that room has that type of leadership now Francisco Lindor, maybe he's had it for a while, but has clearly had that mantle. And I think veteran players like Jose Iglesias and JD Martinez have certainly contributed. But I think Pete Alonso is an emotional guy, and I think he really wants to win badly. And sometimes when you want to win so badly, you press, and maybe this season has featured a lot of pressing. But the beautiful thing is this. They are set up to make the playoffs. It is so right in front of them. You know, it's always been right in front of them, but sometimes like, you're 3 games back, but hey, you got 3 games against Atlanta. Go beat him. You can make the playoffs, and there's no margin for error. The Mets are 2 games up. They have room for margin for error. Not that we want them to commit that margin for error. It's all right in front of them. And for Pete Alonso, who's had this weird season because his overall stats are not awful, they're just not as good as maybe we expect. Maybe they didn't match the expectations we had. He has not had the most clutch season of all time, though we did go through all his home runs a few months ago. Remember that? Remember that exercise? We went through every Pete Alonso home run. we may have to do that again after the season's over. We got to add on the rest of his home runs, right?
Did we? So I think, what is it, 32nd home run? Was that the one that we don't give a crap about? The one where he hit off the
32nd was the home run against Clemens. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. Okay. We throw
that one. That's beyond not clutch. Like, who gives a crap? But I think I said this on the Rico last night. I forgot if I did or I didn't. I definitely said it on the air today on WFAN. A home run that turns a 6-1 game to a 9-1 game is important. I'll tell you why it's important. It's important because the way that game is managed over the last few innings completely changes and could potentially affect you the following day. It's the 6th inning. It's 6-1 going into the 7th inning. The Mets went to Adam Ottavino. Now, Adam Ottavino didn't give up a run, but what if he did? What if all of a sudden it's 6-2? And now Reed Garrett's warming up. And before you know it, Edwin Diaz is warming up. Like, you may win anyway, but the way that game is managed and the way it affects you the following days, that matters. And when you take a game and you completely end it by blowing a team out, by making it 9-1, you end that possibility. And so I'm not arguing that home run that turns a 6-1 game to a 9-1 game is as clutch as a 3-run home run when you're down by 2. Obviously, I'm not arguing that, but to minimize it, and a lot of people did that. I had an email that said Pete's new nickname should be icing on the cake because that's the only time he hits home runs. I mean, I get it. Some are going to be more important than others, of course, but I can't minimize something that completely ends a game, and especially with our history, eliminates the possibility that the bullpen's going to blow the game. And also the hope that hit will turn into something more and get a guy red hot.
I still think that Pete Alonso has 7 home runs and 14 RBIs left in him.
Wow. To get to 40 and 100?
Let's go.
I'll promise you this. If he does that, they'll make the playoffs. So here's where we stand as we enter the final stretch of games in this Major League Baseball season. There are 10 games left. They are tied with the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks have a very tricky schedule. We talk about the Mets schedule. The Diamondbacks have 4 games with Milwaukee in Milwaukee. Granted, the Brewers just clinched the NL Central, so I guess you can be skeptical about what they're capable of doing. What are they playing for? They still have a chance at the 1 seed or the 2 seed. So I wouldn't, completely ignore that. Then they play San Francisco and San Diego at home. So it's not the easiest schedule for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Division rivals, especially those games against San Diego. By the way, one thing that I just looked at it because I was curious. The Brewers won against the Phillies. So they just clinched the division, just clinched it today because Chicago lost, and they won a close game against a really good team. So I guess it's a good sign or a bad sign because remember the Mets played the Brewers to close the season, that Milwaukee is competing. They're trying. And let me see the math on where they are in terms of a first-round bye. They're right there. Like, they're 3 behind Philadelphia for the number 1 seed, and they're 2 behind LA for the 2 seed. And that does matter because if you're the 1 or the 2, you get a first-round bye. Obviously, that is something the Brewers, I think, should still be playing for, at least in the short term. Atlanta's got 1 more game against Cincinnati, rubber game of that 3-game series, and then 3 in Miami. So I know the Mets have gotten some help with the 2 games, with the Dodgers winning 2 and the Reds coming back on Tuesday night. To me, there's an expectation that the Braves are going to rattle off, 4 more in a row, which makes surviving Philadelphia really, really important. Obviously, winning 3 out of 4 would be great. A part of me signs for a split. Because think about it this way. If the Mets can get a split against the Philadelphia Phillies, they will ensure themselves, forgetting what Arizona does, who knows, they ensure themselves that they will either be tied with Atlanta or ahead of Atlanta going into the 3-game series in Atlanta. Tiebreaker is on the line in that series too, so if you want to kind of keep track of that, if you win the series, you win the tiebreaker. So pretty self-explanatory. Obviously, I'd like to go into that series up 3 or 4 games. I'd feel a lot better about that. But if the Mets can get a split against Philadelphia, they will, at the bare minimum, be tied with the Braves going into that 3-game series. Atlanta, obviously, like I said, the 3 Miami, the 3 against us. They closed the season against the Royals, who are also playing for their playoff lives. I have not given up on San Diego. Mets are only 2 games behind the Padres. And really why I haven't given up on them, and they did beat Houston 2 out of 3, which is very disappointing. They got 3 against Chicago, the White Sox. So that's a problem. I mean, they probably win all 3. So the Mets may lose a game or 2 in the standings, maybe more, depending on how they do against the Phillies. But the Padres closed the regular season with 3 in LA against the Dodgers and 3 in Arizona against the Diamondbacks. So it's not likely, but they have a shot. It's still there. And honestly, if the Mets win their games, I mean, look, they've got 10 games left. If the Mets go 8-2, not saying they will. If they go 8-2, they're going to host a wild card series. I'll tell you that right now. I say that confidently. I would think if they can somehow win 8 out of their last 10, which I know is asking a lot, they will be the number 1 wild card team. As far as what's the magic number, the real magic number in terms of if they can win this more amount of games, I think if they win 7 of 10, they definitely make the playoffs, assuming they don't lose all 3 to Atlanta. But even if they did, I think they still would make the playoffs because unless the Braves are just not losing another game. 6-4 is iffy. I think 6-4 is going to be very heavily dependent on if they win the Atlanta series. And obviously what everyone else does. 6-4, by the way, gets them to 90. That's amazing. It is amazing to me. We've been, all of us, in our own different ways, so wrong about a lot of things this season. Where I will take my L on being wrong is how many wins it's actually taking to be a playoff team. Like, I really thought we were looking at 84, 85. I mean, there was a time in which 2 of the 3 wildcard teams were under 500, and it wasn't that long ago. It was, Memorial Day, around there. But it's going to take 90. I don't think there's any doubt now that number, and I said that on the air recently that it was going to take 90. People thought I was nuts. It's going to take 90. May take even more than that. But we got 4 games coming up against the Philadelphia Phillies, and I would sign for a split. You agree with that, Hoff, or is that too losery saying that?
No, I'd take that. Listen, again, you're valid. The 6-4 is tough. 7-3 is good overall these last 10 games. I mean, listen, it's gonna be tight, whatever it is. They've been so good. I can't cry if they do a split. I can't. I still feel that this team's gonna rebound. Now, the one thing you said though is that the fact that they have to win 90 games it's crazy. This was a team that people picked to win 75 games. Just think about that. Think about the trajectory of this team and where they've been. That 11 games under 500 at one point in time. And this is a freaking special goddamn team. I'm so excited.
Though, yes, I don't want to minimize that, but here's what, because I thought about this earlier today. I was thinking about where would this season rank in terms of surprises as a Met fan? And that's an off-season, Rico, I know. But I thought they were an 86-win team, as did you. Like, we were 2 of the more optimistic fans coming into the season. Okay, we were. A lot of Met fans or prognosticators said high 70s or they're horrible or this is the worst staff they've ever seen. But you and I, as Met fans, and this is not, I'm not saying this to brag or anything like that. I'm saying this as if we both thought they were going to be an 85, 86 win team and they win 90, we can't say it's the greatest surprise of all time. Now, how they got there is a surprise. I'll give you that.
Well,
but we both thought they would be a lot better than what the critics said, you know?
But a lot of my criticism, or a lot of my reasoning, I should say, is because I thought baseball's mediocre right now. The way, I mean, did you see the stat that the Mets? I think you mentioned it, but the stat that the Mets put up as far as the pitching has gone with the 5 starters. I mean, Manaea and everyone's ERA is ridiculous. There's no one, like Manaea in the past 18 starts is like 2 point something. Quintana's in past 4 is 0.36. I mean, what is going on is miraculous. This is not how I pictured this team to get here.
That's the part. I do agree with you. But I think like years from now, when we think back to the 2024 New York Mets, I think you think of the actual results and not how you got there, you know, not how the cake was built, if you will, or baked. So yes, I genuinely am surprised with how they got there. You know, the story of how they're getting to this win total is shocking and not something any of us predicted based on where they were being 11 under 500, based on the bad start, and based on what their strengths are. I mean, their strength being their starting pitching, like I said to start, is one of the most stunning things ever. But I guess it would be very difficult to say this is the most stunning season in Met history when we kind of thought they would be good. You know, the year that jumps out at me where I would say that was stunning was probably 1997. I know that was a long time ago, but in 1997, the Mets were coming off a year in which they lost 91 games. There really wasn't that much hope going into the following year, and they won 88 games. Like, they improved themselves by 16 games in the standings. Not to minimize the surprise of this year. And look, that year they didn't make the playoffs. Now, granted, it was a different wild card system. If the Mets make the playoffs and go on a run, this will blow it away just because, you know, they would have gone farther and the season would have been more successful in terms of that. But let's not forget, for the positive Met fan coming into this season, this is what we kind of thought, just not how we got here. But now they got to finish the job. That's it. There were 10 more games left. Finish the job. And as I've said before, we're going to try to Rico every single night until this regular season ends. Tomorrow, Thursday night, will be the lone exception. I'm going to be at MetLife Stadium for the Jet game while simultaneously watching the Met game. I have given thought to, wouldn't that be kind of different, like a drive home Rico from the Jet game, but I'm talking about the Met game? But I don't think we're going to do that. I'm getting an off day. But Friday night against the Phillies, at some point late in the evening, there will be a Rico. Saturday night, late in the evening, at some point, there will be a Rico. Do not expect it right after the games. Pete Hoffman is traveling to Cleveland. I am trying to be a good father. And then Sunday night, that will be right after the game. Sometime right after the game, we'll have a Rico to wrap up the 4-game series. And obviously, the Atlanta series, we will be all over. So a lot of Ricos coming up over the next 2 weeks as we close this regular season. You can always contact us, whether it's complaining or having questions or bitching about the team, the ricob@gmail.com, and we will try to mix in a lot more voicemails. So hit them. If you want to leave a voicemail, if that's easier for you, the phone number is 725. I'm off to a great start. 725-222-8699. 725-222-8699. Whether it's bitching about something, whether it's complimenting the Mets, we will definitely try to incorporate a lot more of the voicemails as the Rico continues on.
And I have to say, I have this strange feeling, Ev. You may be Ricoing tomorrow because have you left a Jets game in a long time? You might be sitting in a lot of traffic.
No, I'm aware of that. Hoff's like, you know what? At midnight, I'm going to get a call from Evan saying, geez, I'm going nuts. Just Rico this crap.
Let's just Rico it.
Yeah, I guess it's a possibility. I wouldn't bank on it, but it's a possibility. Either way, we're going to try to Rico Brogna as much as we can. Thank you very much for listening, subscribing, and downloading another happy edition of Rico Brogna.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Rico Brogna podcast. It's amazing, isn't it? Make sure you download it now to keep it on you at all times.